And the screen is shared, so that means we are underway. Welcome everybody to the Parlor Car Chats program. It's a program of the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum. This slide I put up every time just to remind us of that. From the home page, which is what we're looking at here, you can get to the Parlor Car Chats details on the lower left. And the other thing I highlight on here is that you can also make donations to various aspects of the museum, which has, as you probably are aware, literally no operating income for the last nearly 12 months. So if you are inclined to help support them a little bit, including the Parlor Car Chats and other projects that they have going, that would be great. This slide is to remind everybody that while I have turned off your microphones for the session until the end when we open up for questions and answers, you can still communicate with us, meaning me in this case, and also Rob, who's our presenter for today, via the chat system. And this little screen is just telling you in that what to look for to turn on the chat system for yourself if you haven't already done so. You're looking for a little talkie bubble like for cartoons or the word chat. That will open up the chat session. Then you can basically talk to all of us via text. And one other thing I usually do at the end, but I'm going to do it now, get it out of the way so we can just turn this over entirely to Rob and let him run with it. I usually at the end remind you of what the upcoming chats are, and in the case of today, what follows today follows in 2 weeks' time. That's kind of our typical time frame. On March 6th at the same time in the morning, I'll be doing speeders on the Santa Maria Valley Railroad. There are Motor Car Operators West is a group of motor car speeder operators that tour around places, and in 2008, 2009, 2010, they visited the Santa Maria Valley Railroad and did some excursions on it. So we'll look at pictures and tell some stories about that. Also in this page, you can see upper right-hand corner, the Parlor Car Chats website address if you want details. You can send an email to chats@slorrm.com if you have input, want to present something, want to suggest a topic, etc. That would be great. Okay, so I am going to at this point introduce you and turn control over to Rob Himoto, president of the Santa Maria Valley Railroad. He's going to be our presenter today for an SMVRR excursion that took place to the Huntington Library a few years ago. So let me see if I can get this done. Okay, so Rob, I think I've passed that to you. Oh, I see it. Very good. You're on mute, Rob. We can't hear you. Let's see. Maybe I can try and unmute you. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Can we hear you now, Rob?
Can you hear me, Jamie?
There we go. You're good. And we see your screen.
Okay. Hang on. Let me get situated here. Okay, great. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Rob Himoto of the Santa Maria Valley Railroad, and today I want to talk about the tour of the Huntington Library, and if we have some time, the Huntington Hotel. When I put together trips, whenever I go on a trip, it's always railroad related. It's checking out, it's going someplace checking out trains, checking out greasy, dirty yards, engine houses, do a lot of track inspections. But when you take family, friends, people are not railroaders or railroad enthusiasts, you know, I usually try to find things that are interesting to them, but with a railroad tie-in. I mean, there's only so much you know, your significant other or whatever that's not a railroad enthusiast can look at yards and engine houses. I mean, we think they're neat, but not everybody does. And so I always try to integrate, you know, interesting trips. We did this trip back in 2014. It was actually a board of directors trip, and so we went to Pasadena on the Silver Lariat, and everybody had a great time. So years ago, I was asking around, like, what are good places to go that have a railroad tie-in, so, you know, your family and friends that are non-railroaders will enjoy and put up with your looking at dirty railroad things. And a friend of mine said, mentioned the Huntington, and he goes, "This place is a great place. It's has like world-class art, big botanical gardens, and it's one of those hidden treasures. Usually people think Southern California big art museum would be like the Getty," and he says this goes toe to toe with it, and there's like a lot less people. So it's the Huntington Library, Art Museum, and Botanical Gardens. It's just called the Huntington. It's just one of those places. It's one of the top art museums in the world, and it's just, I'm going to kind of concentrate on that because this is just, to me, it's just such a jewel. That's a kind of a close-up picture of the art museum. So the art museum, and there's actually about six different buildings there. It was the work of Henry and Arabella Huntington. It was established in 1919. Right now, it lies on 215 acres. He actually purchased 500 acres altogether for this project. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Henry and Arabella. So Henry is the nephew of Collis B. Huntington. He, even though he kind of was born into wealth, he created even more wealth. He at one point sold his Southern Pacific stock off and developed the Pacific Electric line in LA, and he did a lot of real estate investments. So in his own right, he really created a lot of wealth. He just wasn't those kind of guys, I inherited this and I'm just going to kick back. He was an entrepreneur and a mover and a shaker. His wife, Arabella, who I consider really pushed for this vision, she's a very interesting person. Arabella, there's not much about her growing up. She was the oldest of 5 children, and her father passed away when she was very young. And her mother and her 5 siblings ended up in Richmond, Virginia during the Civil War, and they were just squeaking out a living with a boarding house. Um, April of 1865 rolls around. The Confederates lost the war, and Richmond, Virginia is just bombed out. And it's just not really the place to be, especially when you're struggling. And even during the war years, uh, people were pretty poor. The Confederates were losing the war, and there really wasn't that much money. The story is she was briefly married and widowed and had a son named Archer. So 19 years old with a baby. So her mother, after the Civil War, sends her to New York City and say, hey, see what you can do out there. And she goes out there, and so all accounts, she's a pretty tall, very pretty lady with a lot of charm, and she somehow meets Collis P. Huntington, which, as you know, is part of the Big Four. He's in New York. The Central Pacific was just starting. He was their fundraiser. He was on the East Coast trying to find investors for the Central Pacific. He was already fairly wealthy because he was in California during the gold rush, and he figured out instead of panning for gold, you make more money selling picks and shovels to the gold miners. And him and Mark Hopkins had a really successful business doing that. So when they formed the Central Pacific, he's the one that got sent to the East Coast to raise money to build the railroad and to convince the government. He was out there lobbying the government. Before Abraham Lincoln was shot, he lobbied Abraham Lincoln to get things going there from a government perspective. So Collis really liked Arabella, hired her, and said, hey, bring your whole family, bring your mom and all your siblings over. And so they all lived at their house, and I'm not sure what they actually did. They probably were the house caretakers, like the housekeepers. Back then there was a lot of work. If you were wealthy, you hired people to take care of the cooking and cleaning. Huntington's first wife had cancer, and Arabella and her mother took care of Collis's first wife until she passed away. Huntington's wife passed away in 1884, and that same year he gets married to Collis. And then after they were married, Collis legally adopted her son Archer. Now, that's kind of the official story. There's scholars that are trying to dissect letters and things, and it was kind of assumed that they had a very long affair while he was married, and they were all under the same roof. And there's actually rumors, this is before DNA, that her son Archer was actually possibly Collis's son. In which, by the way, she told everybody she was widowed, and apparently this person actually surfaced up he was alive. Further studies, they cannot find the marriage certificate, so she may not have been married. It's one of those things back then, if you're trying to get into high society, you kind of sort of bury those things. Back then there was lots of letters and things like that, and the way to get rid of the evidence is you just throw it all in the fireplace. So what little letters and things they have between the two, they're just trying to figure it out. That's most likely what happened. She was a lot younger than Collis, and in the meantime, her nephew Henry would sometimes come by, and they both had a common interest in fine European and American art. And so they would get together and talk about art, and Henry would buy some pieces that he thought should be preserved, and Arabella would buy pieces, and they would donate them to various museums. Collis B. Huntington died in 1900, and when he passed away, he didn't have any kids except Archer, who was adopted. So, and he had vast wealth. By then it was the Southern Pacific, and the Big Four were multi-gazillionaires, and his inheritance split three ways: a third to Arabella, a third to Archer, and a third to Henry. She later marries Henry, Collis's nephew, and you would just assume maybe she's some sort of gold digger or whatever, but Henry and Collis really wanted to figure out what to do with their wealth. They wanted some legacy that'll outlast them, and she kind of helped them come up with this vision of some sort of maybe huge art museum and like preserving history. So in the meantime, Henry wanted Arabella to move to the West Coast. She's an East Coast Southern belle, and so together they designed a grand mansion. He bought 500 acres in San Marino, which is next to Pasadena, and built this grand mansion. And he had these architects designed by Myron Hunt and Elmer Gray. And the grand mansion, I'm not sure if this is it, there's 6 buildings, became the main art gallery. Constructed in 1909, is 55,000 square feet. The art museum is just impressive. Features European American art spanning more than 500 years, includes more than 42,000 objects, and it's, they can't, of course, display 42,000 objects, but there's a lot of paint, and there's some that rotates, so you get a chance, but there's some very famous ones, and here are 2 famous ones. The Blue Boy by Thomas Gainsborough on the left, and on the right, Pinky by Thomas Lawrence. That old European art is stuff that I really like. I'm not into the art where it looks like a kindergarten do it, and then you look at it, there's all this symbolism. This is just this major European American beautiful art by all these famous artists. And this is kind of the room that it is in. And so when I first did this trip, it was for family and friends. We were trying to put together, long story short, an investment firm to invest in railroads. And we put together the first trip in 2001. And when I first went there, I go, this is great. You see all this very rare art, and the place is not packed like the Getty. This is a good example. Thomas Gainsborough and Thomas Lawrence and some other famous artists are in this room, and there's usually not that many people. And so you can really enjoy it without being jostled and all that. There's a very extensive library on the grounds. The statistics is there's 11 million manuscripts, 40 400,000 rare books, and 800,000 photographs. And there's first editions such as Jack London, Mark Twain, and Henry David Thoreau. There's just a lot of just rare first edition books. And here's a first edition, a rare book of Hamlet, and it was published in Shakespeare's lifetime. There's just on and on, all those rare books and manuscripts. The Ellesmere manuscript of the Canterbury Tales that dates from about 1400. And then they have this Hall of Science. It's a permanent exhibition that focuses on astronomy, natural history, medicine, and light. And it was just awesome. I remember Jamie and I spent a lot of time here. It was just, here's like the history of science in this one building. And we spent a lot of time there. It's just a really impressive collection. There's like manuscripts from Galileo to Edwin Hubble, a lot of astronomy stuff there. There's works from Isaac Newton, like his writing, stuff like that. It's just unbelievable how they were able to collect all this stuff. And this is Lynn. There's a whole section of the history of California. There's all these manuscripts and from the Spanish and Mexican rule, early West type stuff. There's a lot of scholars that use the Huntington from various, when they're doing a whole bunch of various studies here. There's a ton of sculptures. I don't know much about sculptures, but very rare, very old. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of Hearst Castle. And of course, we always have a lunch, right? And the Huntington has about 4 or 5 different places to eat. And, you know, you usually go to a museum, and, you know, they have a cafeteria. It's usually one of those, the food isn't very good. It's institutional food. Not at the Huntington. The Huntington is, the food is just top notch. I insisted on the tea room because it's kind of an ode to Arabella. You know, Arabella, she's from the East Coast. They had a high afternoon tea, and their high afternoon tea it's a little different. It's and I'm sure this is going to change. It's a buffet, so you can have all you can eat, because if you ever have high afternoon tea, they have those tiny little sandwiches and scones, and it's more like a snack that you can actually, you know, pile on and make a meal out of it. Right now, the tea room is actually closed, and they're doing extensive remodeling. In fact, the Huntington is closed except for the gardens right now because of COVID, but they are using this opportunity to do some major renovations. Museums that have the capital are using this opportunity to really redo their displays and things like that. But the food is just terrific. The service is terrific. Backing up, I should have mentioned this before when we were talking about the Huntingtons. So when they built all this and collected all this art and built this beautiful botanical gardens, which we'll see in a second here, they wanted a legacy that outlived them. So basically, upon their death, this whole estate was willed to the state. So the state of California actually owns all of this, all the art that's not on loan, the grounds, the mansions. They try to be self-sufficient. He left a very large endowment, so it wouldn't burden the state. But as with anything, this is pretty costly, so they really depend on memberships and donations and visits. But, you know, normally a state-run museum, you have institutional food. No, not at the Huntington. And this is our table setting for lunch at the tea room. We were able to reserve a full table. Well, Botanical Gardens, it's pretty massive. It's 130 acres with more than a dozen themed gardens. And so what we did, and I would suggest this to anybody that visits the Huntington, is the first time is sign up for a tour, because what they do in the tour is they give you kind of an overview of the facilities. Don't really go into the buildings, but tell you which each buildings are, and then kind of cover the botanical gardens. But there is so much to cover, they can only cover a part of it, but they kind of give you some snippets here. And this is the Japanese tea garden, which is the newest garden. It was just opened in 2014, so we were able to see that. And here's another shot of kind of a lake and part of another garden. I think to the right there is an Australian themed garden. And there are nearly 16,000 plant species on the 130 acres. And they got this huge, giant conservatory. I've never been in it, but it contains a whole bunch of laboratories for research. And there's laboratories and classrooms inside. Do a lot of research, and universities send a lot of students there. And of course, you got to have your massive rose garden. So they've got a huge, massive rose garden. In the Chinese garden, they actually have this very beautiful restaurant. It's a Chinese themed restaurant. I've never tried it, but I heard it's really good. But the building itself is just beautifully done. They have a children's area, and it's an interactive children's garden. And I probably should have put more pictures in this. It's highly popular. So the first time going to Huntington back in 2001. I had a friend that graduated from Cal Poly in engineering and went to work at Disney. He's an Imagineering engineer and lives in Pasadena. And at the time, he had two very small kids. And I go, have you ever been to Huntington? He goes, I go there all the time. He goes, it's great for kids. I go, you're kidding. I go, you know, art museum and science museum and all those manuscripts. He had like a 2- and a 4-year-old. He goes, no, this place is huge and there's stuff for kids. And he's raved about the children's garden. And so what he and a lot of locals do is they buy like season passes, and they'll take their kids there very frequently if they lived nearby, so they were there like almost every weekend. And there's just a lot of, it's very educational for kids. And other times he just lets his kids run around on the gardens or on the lawns. There's big, expansive places. There are a lot of events at the Huntington. Weddings. I mean, not right now, but weddings, special events. And there's a lot of places where you can just hang out and be by yourself. A lot of students will come here, do their homework. Artists would come here to paint and draw. Um, it's it's very relaxing, very peaceful, and there's all these different areas where whatever mood you're in, you can find a place um, that'll be really enjoyable to kick back. But a lot of people will buy the season passes just to, especially spring and summer, hang out in the gardens. Um, there's a fair amount of movie shoots that are done here too. So where we stayed at is the Huntington Hotel, which is it was it's actually called the Langham Huntington Hotel now. It was um, it was built actually on the original grounds of the Huntington. The Huntington, like I mentioned, was at one point 500 acres, and Henry Huntington, I mean, Arabella spent a lot of money. He had a lot of money, but he had to like sell some stuff, so he eventually sold off about 200 acres of his land um, to equip the Huntington. Um, a gentleman by the name of General Marshall Wentworth wanted to build a hotel, a luxury hotel, and so he bought 20 acres from Huntington and built this hotel. Originally built in 1907. Had the railroad come up to it, an interurban railroad owned by Huntington, served the hotel. But the hotel didn't make it. It was still kind of the Wild West. Southern California was kind of on the rough edges, so it didn't really make it. And then, so Henry Huntington like bought the property back, and he did a major redesign by architect Myron Hunt, the same architect who designed his mansion and a couple of other buildings. And so he really made it to this very luxury five-star hotel. The hotel and grounds he built 27 bungalow cottages also. So it's on 20 acres. It's got these cottages on the outside. And it was a place for very wealthy people. Eventually, the hotel was sold in 1954 for the Sheraton Company, and much of the hotel's interior were boarded over, and it was just basically a Sheraton hotel. In 1985, they did these seismic tests, and the main building, as you see here, was deemed unsafe. So they had to completely rebuild this main building, and it cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But they wanted to, I think, in the 70s and 80s, it was kind of getting a little ragged anyway, and so they completely did the whole hotel. And the Sheraton Company spent a ton of money. City of Pasadena actually helped them because they recognize it's really an important institution that was kind of an ode to the past. So when it reopened, the Ritz-Carlton bought it and it became a Ritz-Carlton. And that's kind of when I heard about it. It's like, no, it's like this place is like top notch and restored. And then October 2007, there was an ownership change and renamed the Langham. It's part of the Langham. I can't remember it's who's the ownership, but they own like very expensive high-end hotels throughout the world. This is another view. This hotel's appeared in a lot of movies. The rooms are really huge. I should have took a picture of our room. The smallest rooms are like 415 square feet. But as Jamie, we talked about it afterwards, you know, it's one of those really expensive hotels. I think the rooms start at like 350 and they go up from there. The cottages are like 5,000 a night. But it's one of those places where you spend all this money, but you really felt like you got your money's worth. Huge rooms, the lobbies are very beautiful. And they have gardens, kind of like the Huntington. And there's a Chinese themed garden in the middle of the grounds. I would go for walks in the morning, and you can walk for like an hour, going through the gardens, going through the where the cottages are. You can totally get a workout. I don't have a picture, but they have a major fitness facility and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And here's the courtyard here. One of the courtyards, one of many courtyards. Oh, and then they have 4 restaurants. And we're talking about high-end restaurants. This is the highest end restaurant. It's the Royce. It's a very high-end steakhouse. You could pretend to be a wealthy railroad baron. Yeah. I've never been in it. I think Jamie has. It's very high-end, very expensive, but excellent food. Here's another restaurant, more of the mid-price. Mid-price is still, it's pretty high, but just great food, great atmosphere. In the interior, this is one of the rooms, are just beautiful. Lots of high-end events, lots of weddings. A friend of mine who works for Disney says when they do like high-end events, or like when management is there and you know they have to attend a meeting, says it's usually at Huntington and with no expenses spared. This is just outside one of the lobbies. I lifted this picture, but when we were there was a wedding, and this wedding, it looked like this. Whoever were getting married, they spent a lot of money. They actually had rented two of the ballrooms, which I think that was that previous picture. I snuck in there. They had everything cordoned off, but I snuck in there to have some pictures. But I didn't want to take a picture of their wedding, but it looked like this. It's also a site of like I said, many movie shoots. And that's funny. This is like taken. This picture was taken the morning after that wedding, and they had the grounds completely cleaned up. It was like the wedding didn't even happen. So I kind of saved the train pictures for last. So both trips we took the Silver Lariat, which is the California Zephyr car, and both times we had service staff from the Union Pacific Railroad staff it for us with the stewards and the chef to make it a kind of just a really nice high-end trip. And so, and it's one of those themed trips where, you know, you have the Huntington where you see the results of what they did with their wealth and how it's preserved. These days, railroads don't make that kind of money. None of us are railroad barons like that. The billionaires that are involved in railroads, so Warren Buffett, Dennis Washington, Patrick Bro, they made their billions in other industries and then bought railroads. But the rest of us, it's not like it used to be where railroads were monopolies. But it's just kind of neat that the Huntingtons, they didn't go out and blow their money. They actually did something with it, what we call all enjoy. And so this is actually us coming back from that trip. And that's us inside the Silver Lariat having our final meal before that trip was over. And so I kind of ran through this presentation, but that's the end of my presentation. What I want to say is, the Huntington is, I really recommend, if you have the opportunity to visit the Huntington, it's just one of those hidden jewels, and there's just not enough pictures to do its justice. There's just a lot of stuff there, and large botanical gardens. But I really recommend it. We're going to put together a friends trip for the fall. Take the train, stay at the Huntington Hotel, visit the library. But with COVID, basically they said they're going to be closed through the rest of the year. Their ultimate goal is to have the museum open by the Rose Parade. And so we're going to postpone that trip, and it's going to probably be next year in the fall, like a year from the original date. So that's really what I have for today. If anybody has any questions or comments.
Dave,
I see that Stan asked a question about where the train leaves you off. I presume he means near. How close do you get to the Huntington on the train, and then how do you get to the Huntington from the train station?
Oh, yeah, good question. So we took it was on the back of the Coast Starlight. We went from San Luis to LA Union Station. Actually, Jamie and I, we actually made it longer. We drove to Paso Robles so we can hit plus the grade. We went into Union Station, and then We took a taxi to Pasadena. It's not very long. I think there is a way with MetroLink to get into Pasadena, but it was just easier because we just took the taxi and they just took us right to the hotel.
You could do that anytime.
This is unmute.
So for the friends trip next year, how would you envision something similar to that?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out. Trying to see what the situation with Amtrak is. Can't do private cars anymore. I mean, that would have been the way to go. So, yeah, it's just we're going to have to figure this out. Hopefully, there's Amtrak's back to normal. So,
yep.
Because we could take the Pacific Surf Line. There's plenty of options.
Does the Surfliner stops in Glendale, not Pasadena, right? But I guess you could go from either Glendale or LA Union Station to get to the Huntington then.
Yeah, it's just that Union Station is just more practical because it's a bigger station, and then plus you have all the shuttles and all the taxis.
Yes.
You walk down out there, it's no problem. It takes a couple minutes, or Uber. It's real easy with Uber.
Yep.
You know, all your options. There's just more options at Union Station, and it doesn't take that long. I recall it was like less than 20 minutes. Yeah. So.
Any other questions for Rob?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the cost of the trip was, the last trip.
What was the question again?
What was the cost for the trip, the last trip?
Well, that last trip, it was actually a railroad trip, so it was like and so it was kind of a group together. The hotel rooms I recall were like $350 a night. The Huntington, we did a package deal. I included entrance in the tea, and I don't recall what that was because it was more of a business trip. So
Hi, Sean. This is your cousin Walt. It's about 1 o'clock your time on Saturday. My return number, you have my cell phone number for your text, and my return home number is 760-448-6662.
Not sure where that noise is coming from.
I just wanted to check in with you because I know it's been about a week since, the
Okay, Rob, you can unmute yourself if you want. I turned everybody off again. You can come in if you hit your mic.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you're there. You're there.
Let's see, I can't open the chat box. Is there anything in the chat box? For some reason,
no, Gary caught the one thing that came in about where the train leaves off, so you've covered that.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you everybody for joining. Just to kind of reiterate, Jamie, the museum's closed. There's no income coming in, so I think the museum really appreciate any donations or even if you're a member, if you can throw a few bucks at them since it's closed. I know they're trying to work on some displays, so a little bit extra money so they can keep working on displays while it's closed. Just to show you where I put my money where my mouth is, I'm actually going to send a check to them today, just to keep them going there. So
nice. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
So thank you everybody again, and looking forward to Jamie's talk on the speeders on the SMBRR. It's funny because we really had a lot of fun. Really enjoyed having them, but it's been a few years, so it's kind of neat to see that presentation from memory lane.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. And then let me thank everybody for joining us again today, too. And with that, we'll cut it off. You can always find recordings of past sessions on the website, as well as information about upcoming Parlor Card chats.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
So, thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.